Hello, and welcome back to ATA Live. My name is John Humphreys from the ATA standing for the Australian Taxpayers Alliance. That is us, taxpayers.org.au. Go and check it out. Have a look around the campaigns. All of my angry ranting about tax and Brian's excellent work on free speech and other work. And if you feel so inclined, the top right corner, you can find out where to become a member. Help us to keep the lights on. But anyway, this is ATA Live, where I come to you Mondays and Thursday evenings to chat about the political issues of the day and try to inject a bit more policy depth, hopefully, a bit more serious policy discussion, which is especially regarding to, I suffer from being an economist, so I'm going to mostly take an economic approach to things, and we talk a lot about tax, as the name of our organization might give away. So this is simulcast to YouTube, to X, and to Facebook. If you're watching us on any of those, please give us a like and a share. And if you haven't already, please jump around those 3 social media platforms looking for the Australian Taxpayers Alliance and John Humphreys, my personal page. Give us a like, give us a follow. That helps us to keep in touch with everyone and to keep the conversation going. So this is live. That means you see my mistakes live, and I'm also able to see your comments live. If they come in, feel free to throw tomatoes, give your feedback, give your commentary, ask questions, disagree. We can have a conversation. I'm happy to get distracted if anyone shows up with good comments or questions that are worth getting distracted on. But if not distracted, then I do have something that I was planning on chatting with you about today. Look, I'm going to try. I say this at the beginning of so many chats, but these things aren't scripted, so I honestly don't know how long they're going to go for. I'm going to try to keep this one shorter. Famous last words, right? Famous last words. But I genuinely, that is my goal, my intent. And I really had just one key thing that I wanted to rant about in this session, in this live stream, and that is the recent economic policy announcements from the major parties. I mean, we're in the middle of a federal election campaign. Liberal and Labor, that the polls seem to be shifting back towards Labor, and everyone's interpreting everything through the prism of, does this help with the election? Understandable, obvious, maybe the right question to ask, but I can't help but also ask, is that a good policy idea? I mean, it's what I do. I'm an economist, and I'm paid at the ATA to think about good policy ideas that are hopefully going to help Australia, especially on the economic front. And look, not to bury the lead, I found the weekend's announcements very disappointing. And I'll be specific here. I don't normally expect too much from the Labor Party. Sorry, Labor Party. I'm sure your parents love you, but I don't normally expect too much on the economic front. Like, I'm a tax-cutting, free market economics guy. I don't expect Labor to be doing that. The Liberals used to be the tax-cutting party, and so I have found myself pulling my hair out about the nature of the tax policy coming out of the Liberal Party. The ATA had been running we still are, if you go to the website, taxpayers.org.au, running a petition to calling on the Liberal Party to cut tax. As we've discussed before, Labor put out a very small, meek, mild income tax cut. The tax cut isn't big enough. It's going to get clawed back in bracket creep, but at least it's a tax cut. I mean, the one big thing in Labor's favor is the tax cut exists, right? So the Liberal response was, oh, well, we just won't have one. And their tax cut's small, so we won't have one. So the ATA put out a petition calling on the Liberal Party, please cut income tax. And we gave a whole series of ideas. We've discussed some of those ideas in depth. Some of those ideas we just sort of touched on in passing, but I will get back to another idea this Thursday, so tune back in on Thursday. But there are plenty of ideas, and there's lots of other ideas that we haven't put out, that other people, the business groups have put out lots of good ideas about how you could tweak business taxes. There's lots of ideas out there. And on the weekend, the Liberal Party made a big announcement, a $10 billion announcement, that they are going to do something on income tax. Hallelujah. That's what we'd been asking for, right? And I got to say, when I saw the details, it was so bloody disappointing. I'm really torn. I don't know what to do about this in terms of commentary. I mean, I'm supposed to come and speak my mind and talk honestly about economics and politics and policy and tax. I don't think there's any point listening to me if I'm not speaking honestly about it. But I don't want Labor to win. I don't want to be 3 weeks out from an election criticizing the Liberal Party. But I'm kind of torn. What do I do? I mean, you can tell me, viewing public, should I just shut up and stay quiet, accept that the Liberal Party has just decided to have terrible policy this election and hope that they do better next time? Or do I open up two barrels on them and sort of explain all the idiocy? So I'm going to try and, I guess I haven't started very nice, so I'll try and stay as nice as an objective as possible. But this whole episode is brought to you by disappointment. So anyway, what did the Liberal Party announce after this weeks of saying that they are opposed to income tax cuts, and even remarkably saying that they were going to reverse Labor's income tax cuts, i.e. put up income tax rates? On the weekend, they announced a tax offset. Now, it's already been noted by many other people that this tax offset is only for 1 year. Right, so obviously, this is not tax reform. I mean, even then, on the starting point, Labor's tax cut, as piddling as it is, at least it exists in 2 years' time. Right? So the Liberal Party tax cut, just like the fuel tax cut, it's for 1 year only. So obviously that's not tax reform. It's not even an attempt at tax reform. And other people have noticed that, there's been a lot of shade thrown at the Labor Party because their tax cut doesn't kick in for 15 months. And fair enough. Yeah, they should kick it in earlier. The Liberal policy, this income tax cut, this one-off 1 year tax cut only kicks in 15 months. Other people notice that, right? And look, I think the 15-month thing, sure, that makes for good politics, but as long as they're going in the right direction, then if we have to wait a little bit for budget purposes, then I'm not going to get too upset. But the temporary thing makes it a bit of a joke, right? So it's not real tax reform. But here's the kicker: the tax change they've done increases tax rates. I didn't misspeak. That's not a typo or whatever a verbal typo is. The way they have done it with a means-tested tax offset means that they are actually increasing the marginal tax rates on 1 million Australian workers. Right. And so and this is the case every time they have these means-tested tax offsets, right? They did the low and middle income tax offset, the Lamito, previously, and everyone talked, oh, great, we're getting a tax cut. It was a terrible policy, and I said that at the time. This one is just a reheated Lamito. I think they call it the cost of living tax offset. So it's at COLTO, different acronym. But it's basically just Lamito again. It's got the same problem. The low income tax offset has the same problem, that it cuts marginal tax rates for some and increases it for others. It is a bad way to do tax cuts. I mean, if your goal is actually to boost the economy and boost productivity, and if you've been listening to me for a while, you know that I'm always ranting on and rabbiting on about productivity, and it sounds boring, but if you're in any way frustrated by our cost of living crisis, fundamentally it's caused by a lack of productivity. Right? The problem we've had in this country in the last couple of years is we have been getting poorer. I mean, GDP per capita, GDP per hour worked has gone backwards. I mean, it basically stalled for the last 8 years and it's been going backwards for the last 2 years. And that's fundamentally caused by a lack of productivity, and you can't solve it with anything other than more productivity. And so what you need is tax reform. I've been screaming that from the rafters. We need tax reform for productivity. But then that requires a tax reform to actually cut marginal tax rates on the people who will change their behavior. That's the whole thing you need. That's the reason why tax cuts is good for productivity. They're not just good for productivity because tax cuts start with a letter T, right? Or because people like getting tax cuts, right? There is a reason that tax cuts are good for the economy. And the reason is it incentivizes a change in behavior towards more productive behavior. And it does that by lowering the marginal tax rates on the people who are going to be more productive. And this Lamito policy increases the marginal tax rates on some of the people who we need to be incentivizing the most. So let me unpack that a little bit, because this will sound, that assertion by me might sound weird at first glance. And so I need to disentangle two very different issues. All right. Most people, especially most media, and then because of the media is doing it, the politicians do it, and then we all think it's normal, interpret tax cuts through the prism of how big is my tax cut? How much money do I get? Which, look, for political reasons, I can understand that. For you personally, perhaps that's the most important thing. It is for your household budget. But that's only one way of looking at tax cuts, right? I mean, that's what's in it for me, and great. I hope it's something in it for you. That's wonderful. When we're talking about tax cuts for the purpose of pushing productivity, it doesn't matter how much money you have in your pocket. It matters how your incentives are changed, right? It matters how your incentives are changed. And for that, it's your marginal tax rate. If you're earning, say, $90,000 and you're thinking of doing some overtime and you'll be getting up to $100,000, so that's a $10,000 extra you're going to be earning. How much of that extra do you get to keep, right? That marginal change in behavior. That's what matters for economics, right? That's what matters for productivity. So it doesn't matter how much money's in your pocket. It's great for you. It matters to you how much money's in your pocket. But in terms of being good for the economy, good for productivity, good for rising your wages and lowering your prices, making life more affordable, making people more prosperous, what matters is what does it do for productivity? And so the opposition and the media are correct to say that the Liberal policy would put more money in your pocket. Not everyone, right? But a bunch of people, like millions of people, including my family, will get money in their pocket because of the tax cut. And that's great. I love it. I love having money in my pocket. So no qualms. I'm not complaining about that. That's the way they've described it, but no one's really talking about what it does to marginal tax rates. So let me bring this up. I've worked this out. I mean, it's not hard to work out, right? I plugged this into some old marginal tax rates I had and just adjusted it for the announcement. It's not that hard to do, but I put it together and I'll pretend it's hard so that I seem very fancy and important. And I'll show you this. I put this in an X post that I wrote this afternoon, so you can go and check out my X, formerly Twitter, John Humphreys 99. You can see what I'm getting up to there. But as I write here, well, and this is all the stuff I was saying here. They've given you money back, and that is true. But what matters is the incentives. These are the incentives. This is what's actually changed. I see. They basically don't see this anywhere, which I find infuriating. Is there no one in media or politics that is interested in actually reporting on the economics of a tax change? But no, apparently not. So this is actually what's changing in terms of incentives, right? So the Liberal policy has 3 good things and 2 bad things. It slightly increases the tax-free threshold. Right. So the effective tax-free threshold is about 22.5. It'll go up to about 24, a bit over 24. That's great. So $1,500 higher tax-free threshold. Nice. It will lower the tax rate for people earning between 37 and 48. Right. So let's see here. Between 37 and 45 and between 45 and 48. So between 37 and 48, they see their marginal tax rate, i.e. their incentive to actually earn money, which is the whole thing that matters, their incentive to earn more money is improved. People earning between 37 and 48,000, right? And it's improved because their marginal tax rate is effectively being cut by 8.5%, right? So you can see here from 23 down to 14.5, that's 8.5% lower, and from 33.5 to 27. 8.5% lower, right? So I mean that's like explicitly written in to how the Liberal Party policy will work. Is they are cutting those two effectively, cutting those 2 marginal tax rates, and that's great. I'm all for that. Everyone in Australia is overtaxed. Our income tax system is absurd across the board. Everyone deserves a tax cut, including these people. I love it. It's the next 2, right? It's issues here number 4 and 5 that really do matter, right? I mean, it really does kind of undo a lot of the goodness of this policy. So you see here 3 little tax cuts and then 2 little tax increases, and you put it all together and it's a very disappointing proposal. So here in total, between 104 and 144,000, the marginal tax rates are going up by 3%. Right? See, between 104 and 135, people are going to see their effective tax rates go up from 32 to 35%. And people owning over 135, because that's when you kick into the second top rate, You 37 baseline plus your 2% Medicare levy, plus now your 3% basically Limito tax. So you're up to now 42% for those people, from 39 up to 42. Which, look, to some degree, this is looking like it's a couple of ticks and a couple of minuses. Well, firstly, how do you have minuses in a tax cut policy? Just cut the tax. Stop this piss fighting around with all of this cockamamie offsets and deductions and over here. Just cut the tax, not cut it and increase it. But do a cut over here where everyone sees it and sneakily do an increase when no one's noticing. Just cut the tax. Right, so that's the first point. Is it's a shame to just be talking like that. But secondly, as I'll go on to mention here, I'll get back to that. A lot of people would say, oh, well, these people are earning over 100K. All right, that's not our priority. Who really cares? When we're talking about productivity, these are the exact people you should be caring about. And that's not just hand waving. I mean, this is not an appeal for sympathy for these people. We have clear data on what's called the elasticity of taxable income, i.e. how people change their behavior. And we know which people change their behavior more, which people change their behavior less. This isn't ambiguous. It's not really up for debate. It's just there's thousands, well, I don't know if there's thousands yet, hundreds of studies from around the world, from lots of countries, and it consistently shows. And the cutoff point often is about $100,000. People earn more than that. They change their behavior more. These are the exact people that do change their behavior more. They need, as I wrote here, these are the exact people we need to be lowering marginal tax rates on. We need lower marginal tax rates for people earning in this like 80 to 180 bracket, or 82 to, I'd say, about 300 bracket. I mean, that's the sweet spot, in my opinion, for where you want to be having lower marginal tax rates if you want to incentivize productivity. Those are the exact people that need lower marginal tax rates. This policy gives them higher marginal tax rates. Higher is the opposite direction to lower. I mean, it's and the consequence of that is there's actually a chance this policy will cost the budget, and I guess there'll be money in our pockets, and we'll be happy about that. There's a chance this policy would actually take the economy backwards, which seems like a remarkable thing to say from a tax-cutting economist such as myself. And I think taxes should be slashed, government spending should be slashed, regulations should be slashed. I'm a small government guy. But the Liberal Party has managed almost to find the only tax cut in the history of humanity that might actually be bad for productivity. Because they cut the marginal tax rates on people who don't change their behavior much. So you get a benefit. They change their behavior a bit, so you get a benefit. But then they increase the marginal tax rates on the exact people that do change their behavior. And so, like I did, the ATA, Australian Taxpayers Alliance, we have a tax model, a behavioral tax model that factors in behavioral change. As far as I know, the only one in Australia, which should be embarrassing for the Department of Treasury to not have one, and they should have one. But anyway, I ran this through now. I haven't had the time to go and quality assure this. I normally spend a few days playing around and try to poke holes in my own model to make sure it's right before I go public. But I've done it today. I've got the back of the envelope results. I'll come up with front of the envelope results over the course of this week. So if you see me later modifying slightly these results, so be it. That happens. But anyway, I ran them through the model the first time. And what we find is that the tax cut part of this policy of Limito, right, the tax cut, the lower marginal tax rates for people earning, 37 to 48,000. Great, love it. And a slightly higher tax-free threshold. The behavioral model predicted that would boost GDP by about $10 billion. $10 billion, so that's nice. So we should just do that, because that 10 billion here, 10 billion there. Pretty soon we're talking about real money. But the point is, we need tax cuts to boost productivity, to boost taxable income, to boost GDP per person. And the tax cut part of the Liberal proposal would boost GDP, the behavioral model suggests, by about $10 billion. Great. Here's the problem. The tax increase part of the policy, right, increasing the marginal tax rate by 3%, on people earning between about $104,000 and $144,000, making their incentives worse, disincentivizing them from earning money, punishing them more for the crime of being productive and earning money, that will cost the economy, I estimate here, the rough estimate of 12 billion. So the tax cut part of the Liberal policy helps the economy by 10. The tax increase part of their policy hurts the economy by 12. Somehow, in all of the ideas that exist out there to cut tax, the Liberal Party seems to have found the only tax cutting policy that will make the country poorer. So, I mean, I said at the beginning I was going to try and not sound too snarky. I'm just, I don't know if you can pick up, I find it very frustrating. There was such a great opportunity to go to this election with a good tax cutting policy. And there's lots of ideas, as I've got down here in this paragraph, the second paragraph. There's lots of ideas. They don't have to pick them all. Pick one, hopefully two. Indexing tax thresholds would have been a great idea. You could start it in 2 years' time. You have your little fuel tax splash for now in the short term, and then have indexing tax thresholds kick in 2027. Hardly even hits the Ford estimates, so it won't hurt you too much for the people who are just looking at budget documents. It's a stupid thing to be looking at, but unfortunately the media do. So, and then you'd have significantly improved tax policy. Anyway, I've talked about that before, but family tax treatment, child tax credits, or increasing tax-free thresholds for each child you have, dropping the marginal tax rates, just dropping them, not dropping them and secretly raising them elsewhere, as the Liberal Party policy does, just dropping them, or increasing the thresholds, increasing the top threshold up to $500,000 that I suggested 2 episodes ago. Remove the regressive steps in our income tax system, which is stupid that we have regressive steps. Allow a standardized deduction, which is just, I don't want to be saying this, but that's just objectively a good idea. And that's what Labor's doing. Why are they making me say this? I don't want you to vote for Labor. I'm not spruiking Labor. I'm not saying go and vote for Labor, but the Liberal Party has put out a terrible tax cut, and the Labor has actually put out a proper tax cut, like a proper tax reform, like allowing standardized deductions and doing it permanently, right? This is a permanent reform that makes our tax system better and cuts the tax you pay. And it decreases the amount of sort of overhead costs, right? The administrative costs, improves the simplicity of the system. Anyway, that's an idea that we've pushed before. And anyway, the Liberals could have done that. They could beat that with a $2,000 standard deduction. That would be even better. Or, tax-free savings accounts. I haven't talked about that yet, but I will. Integrate the tax and welfare system. We talked about the absurd effective marginal tax rates previously. Allow cash flow tax for small business. There's lots of good ideas out there that you could do on tax cuts and really take the mantle of the tax-cutting pro-productivity party. This was such a good opportunity to do that. Labor opened the door with their piddly little tax cut, and you could have done the Crocodile Dundee, that's not a tax cut, this is a tax cut. And not only could that have worked politically, but we need it desperately. We are overtaxed. Productivity is in a slump. It's not going to come back because we just keep changing the color of the micromanagers in Canberra. We need some mix of 3 things: lower taxes, less regulation, and cheaper energy. And we need to do them all. But tax cuts has to be part of that mix. Income tax cuts has to be part of that mix, and it's missing. And this latest proposal just wasn't a real proposal on that front. I wrote here, instead, they've managed to find the only one that doesn't work. I guess it works well on opinion polls. And then I've shown this before. I've shown this graph before. The red part of it was what I'd showed as the actual tax rates. Actually, this is a bit difficult to read this way. I'm going to show it to you another way if I can work out how to do this. Bear with me a second. Sorry to get you stuck looking at my mug, but let's see. Did that work for you? Yeah, now this will be an easier way to show it, showing it one at a time, right? So this is, or maybe I'll go back a step. For the people who haven't followed along and played this game with us before, I'll go back a step. This graph shows what the government and the media tells us our tax system is. These are the official tax rates, right? Along the y-axis, you've got the percentage, the tax rates, and along the x-axis, your income in thousands of dollars, right? So this is 6,000, 11,000, 16,000, all the way up to 251,000. And you see you've got the beginning bit where you don't have to pay tax, and then you've got the 16% tax rate, which Labor has now proposed to cut to 14%, which is a good idea. This is the 16% tax rate, then the 30% tax rate, then the 37%, and then the 45%. So that is the progressive tax system that our media, bureaucratic, political class tells us exists. And as we've discussed before, this is something closer to what actually exists. And you can still see it's stepping up, but you can see a couple of weird things going on here. This little bump caused by a ridiculous Medicare levy threshold, a 10% Medicare levy threshold. We've talked about that before. We should get rid of that. And then this here is the clawback. This is the LITO tax, basically. This is the clawback of the low-income tax offsets. You should stop having means-tested tax offsets because they just increase tax on other people. But anyway, this is the messy system we currently have. Now, I would have thought a fair-minded, thinking person would look at this and say, I can see ways to reform this. But I can see ways to, cut this down here, maybe cut this down here. Maybe these people shouldn't be paying tax. If you look at this graph and you say, this is a bit messy, right? It's a bit messy. Taxes are too high on too many people, and it's jumping up and down too much. I tell you what we should do is change it to this, because this is the Liberal policy. This is not what I put to you, what you would do if your goal was to fix the previous graph, right? So you had a look at this graph, you think it jumps up and down a bit. I know, we'll do this. So you've still got the same starting position, basically, and then you drop down a bit lower, and then you jump up higher, and then you've got this stupid bump at the end here, where you've got now a second regressive part in the tax system. And that is the tax system, and then just overlaying these two graphs on top of each other, so you can see one on top of the other. The blue one is the Liberal proposal. The red one is the current system, the current system before Labor's tax cuts, right? Because Labor's dropping the 16% rate down to 14%, but that hasn't happened. I mean, we're not living with that yet. It's been legislated, but it hasn't come into effect yet. So ignoring that earlier tax debate, you can see the main changes are the Liberals have got this tax rate down lower for the people earning between 37 and 48. They've got this nice little tax cut here and here. And that's great. I'm not against that. Cut taxes everywhere, always. Love it. That bit's good. But this bit over here is where they've put the taxes up by 3% for these people earning between 104 and 144,000. The exact sort of small business people who could be making a decision about whether to, invest in another piece of capital or expand their business or to franchise or make some sort of decision about how productive they're going to be. And those people now are going to be paying a higher marginal tax rate if this policy goes through. So that is the nature of my concern here. And you can see, given there are so many ideas that we could have pursued as a country, there are so many tax ideas that we need as a country. I mean, I've listed some of them before. You've heard me talking about others over the last couple of weeks. There are lots more that I won't get around to covering. And we can quibble about which are the most important. And that's a good argument to have, right? Let's have that argument, right? For people who are interested, who normally, I guess, kind of right of center or interested in smaller government. Let's have that discussion about which of those tax cuts we have, but please, not the tax cut that comes with a tax increase. Right? And LITO is a little better, right? The low income tax offset that already exists. One of our proposals from ATA is actually to replace LITO, that tax offset, replace the tax offset that already exists, get rid of it, and just increase the tax-free threshold. And instead of getting rid of this tax offset that bastardizes our tax system, the proposal is to add a second tax offset that further bastardizes our tax system. Anyway, can you sense the frustration? This comes after their last income tax policy was to propose a tax increase. So clearly, the Liberal Party is not fully taking my advice on their income tax policy for this election. Clearly, I have not been successful in moving the needle on that front. Look, I got to say, this sounds like I'm basically just spruiking a vote for Labor. That is not what I'm trying to say here. I mean, it is. Look, to be brutally honest, Labor's income tax policy is just better than the Liberals' one. Now, they are offering an actual tax cut from 16 down to 14%. The Liberals are saying they'll put it back from 14 up to 16. Labor's just better on that. And then the Liberals are offering this bastardized hellscape of a LITO for only 1 year. this tax offset that ruins the tax system and increases marginal tax rates, and then only doing it for 1 year. And meanwhile, Labor is offering to actually allow people to do a standardized tax deduction of $1,000 instead of itemizing, which just saves on admin costs and gives people a small tax cut. So on income tax policy, I think just unambiguously, any honest person has to say that Labor has a better and lower income tax policy than the Liberals. But it is saying that. I'm very aware it looks like that would be something someone would say if they're a Labor Party spruiker. So I am not that. I mean, people who have watched me for a while would know that I am very much instinctively predisposed, I should say, towards preferring Liberal over Labor. I mean, I guess that's one of my frustrations is if you have low expectations and someone lets you down, you kind of expect it. But I constantly allow myself to have higher expectations of the Liberal Party, perhaps because I kind of see them as quote unquote my team. I'm not a Liberal Party member, by the way. But they could be so much better than that. And I'm not saying all this is a Labor spruiker because there's still lots of reasons not to vote Labor, right? I mean, just most obviously, the one that comes to mind is the business tax policy, right? So Labor wants to introduce an extra superannuation tax, which would effectively involve taxing unrealized gains, which is a terrible policy. Liberals don't want to do that, right? So the Liberals get the tick on that, and the Liberals have the accelerated depreciation for small businesses on capital expenditure up to $30,000, which that is a great policy. They should have gone further, but I'm not. That's a step in the right direction is a step in the right direction. So, and there's lots of the Liberal Party, I think, is better on energy policy, which is crucial. That's one of the three I said before, right? Lower taxes, lower regulation, cheaper energy. And so there's lots of reasons to still vote for Liberal over Labor. But I got to say, if you're a one-issue voter and that one issue is income taxes, then Labor is better on income taxes this election, which they just shouldn't be. It's an embarrassing political decision by the Libs. But this is where we are. This is where we're at. So the other policies announced on the weekend were the housing policy, of course. Both Liberal and Labor have said they're just going to keep boosting demand. The idea is we don't have enough houses to live in. So if we don't have enough houses, what we should do is boost demand. And if we can just boost demand enough, then unicorns and kittens or something like that. So look, these policies do work at the margin because they're increasing demand focused on the specific first home buyers. So get them into the market. They displace some investors or some people switching houses. And that at least gets them into the market. So it's not all for nothing, but if you're not talking about making sure there's more houses, you're not talking about housing, right? You two things, either just fewer people needing to live in Australia, which is an immigration question basically, or a visa question, right? Residency question. There needs to be fewer bums in seats, or there needs to be more seats. Those are the only things to talk about if you honestly want to do something about housing. This demand side policy is shuffling deck chairs for the most part. So it's hard to get too excited about both sides of that equation. So that's why I spent all of this time talking about tax. And also because this Liberal Party tax cut, I see so many people on the right saying, yeah, tax cut, the low and middle income tax offset, the Lamito, what a great policy. It gave us a tax cut. It put money in your pocket, and that's great. I love money in my pocket. It screws up the incentives. It sends the incentives backwards. If we're supposed to be the economically sensible party, the smart party, the people doing the smart economics, not led by emotions, led by rationality, please, Paul Murray, for the love of all things holy, be led by rationality to look at the incentives created by these policies. They are terrible policies. Well, terrible is overstating it. Look, I'll caveat that. They're not terrible policies. They're just such disappointing tax cuts because they cost $10 billion, don't improve productivity, and there's so much else that could have been done. So much better that could have been done. Anyway, enough ranting by me. I think I am going to make an effort to get out of here quicker. I'll just take one or two of the comments. Thank you, Ozzy. At what point do tax cuts drive inflation? For the most part, they shouldn't. I mean, here's the kicker. The Liberal Party one might. Oh, it just keeps getting worse. No, here's the kicker on that. Tax cuts, people talk about, they can end up with putting more money in the economy. And there's some truth to that. They put more money in the economy, not the way you think, right? It doesn't come in the economy because you have more money in your pocket. It's because the government's going further into debt. But anyway, it's just there's more money in the economy, and more money sloshing around chasing goods is what creates inflation, right? So that's the argument. That's true as far as it goes, but it's only half of the story, right? I mean, inflation comes from too much money chasing not enough goods, right? And there's two sides to that, right? Too much money chasing not enough goods, right? If you increase the amount of money and the goods is the same, you get inflation, right? That's just like if there's $10 chasing 10 bananas, each banana is $1. If there's $20 chasing 10 bananas, each banana is $2, right? So now you've had inflation, right? The price has gone from 1 to 2 because the amount of money's gone up, but the amount of stuff hasn't. So that's the core idea. And yeah, if you increase the amount of money with the stuff being constant, but as I said before, to my mind, the whole reason for tax cuts, the reason for tax cuts isn't, oh, look, I've got money in my pocket. I love getting more money in my pocket. That's great for a kind of self-interested pitch to everyone's self-interest. And that's part of politics, and I get it. But that's not the economic pitch for tax cuts. This isn't a pitch for selfishness. It's a pitch for productivity raises all the boats. Everyone can share in greater prosperity, lower prices, higher wages. Just everyone can be more prosperous. This isn't me trying to take your money. It's everyone can get more prosperous if we boost productivity, and tax cuts can boost productivity. And what does that mean? You boost productivity, there's more money chasing more stuff. Right? So if you increase money without increasing productivity, that can create inflation. That's it. This is to your point here, right? So more money sloshing around the economy without more stuff to buy creates inflation. But if you put more money in the economy in a way that also creates more stuff to buy, productivity enhancing, then it doesn't necessarily create inflation. So a good productivity enhancing tax cut won't create inflation. It could even create deflation. It could put downward pressure on inflation if it's done right. But we don't have to quibble about that. I won't make that claim. That claim isn't important. The important point is you're not going to see too much inflation from tax cuts if the tax cuts drive productivity. And as I said before, from my draft numbers here, from my rough numbers, the Liberal Party policy will actually send productivity backwards, like a $10 billion step forward and then a $12 billion step backwards. So, plus 10 minus 12 is a negative number, right? Negative $2 billion GDP impact. So in the grander scheme of things, it'll be hard to pick up in the long run, but it's not increasing productivity, right? That's the important point there. My rough numbers say it slightly decreases it. All right. Say you're skeptical of that. Let's just call it a wash. It doesn't increase productivity. And so, Aussie, you may be right on this account. This one might actually drive a little bit of inflation. But in general, tax cuts don't, right? If tax cuts boost productivity, and nearly all tax cuts on Earth except this current Liberal Party tax cut, does drive productivity, and because of that, they generally aren't the cause of inflation. Which I always like getting distracted onto a good macroeconomic rant after doing all this microeconomics. This tax policy is a microeconomic issue. Inflation's macroeconomics. The two are related, of course, but yes, it's slightly different hats to wear. Anyway, that's I think the end for me today. I will beg out here before the 40-minute mark. I will come back again on Thursday evening, and we can have a chat about some new ideas coming out of the ATA, right? So we've seen the ideas coming out of mainstream politics, and I have been unimpressed. Let me know what you think. The other thing is you might have the opinion, and this might be the correct opinion, that at this stage, 3 weeks out from an election, all that matters is it popular? You throw a Hail Mary, you got to try and win politically. If that's the calculus, then it's not what I am an expert in. It's not what I enjoy. I want to see good policy being put out there in front of people and argued for. But if that's the argument, then fair enough. Let me know. Do you think that's the argument? Is this just they're going to put out what's poll tested instead of what's good? And if that gets them over the line, is it worth it? So you tell me. I mean, I think it hamstrings them to only doing bad policy forever. That's my concern. But if it gets them over the line, and you, dear listener, happen to be someone who gets a staffer's job because of it, then maybe it has all been worth it after all. Good politics is bad economics. Good economics is bad politics. Yeah, well, there's also the maxim some people say of good policy is good politics. I think, right, I don't know if that's true. I wish it's true. It hopefully can be sometimes. I think Keating said that back in the day. I quite enjoy the quote from Thomas Sowell, who, in my opinion, is the greatest living economist. He's a bit past his prime now because I think he's 90 something, but he's written and done some great work in his life. And he's got one quote. I'm going to get it wrong now because I'm doing it off the top of my head, but it's something along the lines of the first rule of economics is that there is scarcity. There's never enough to go around. You always have to make trade-offs. And the first rule of politics is to ignore the first rule of economics. And I find that often seems to be the case, right? You lay out an economic argument, and the first rule of politics is, that truth is inconvenient to what I'm doing right now, so piss off. Maybe that is the world that we live in. But anyway, all we can do is to try to make that world better by coming together, chatting, swapping ideas, and hopefully getting the idea out there that we do need real tax cuts. This one isn't it, but we do need real tax cuts. If we keep talking about it, hopefully someone will eventually hear it. So please give this video a like. Please give it a share. Please go around to the Australian Taxpayers Alliance and John Humphreys, our pages on X, on YouTube, on Facebook. Give us a like, give us a follow. Reach out if you like. You can reach us through those social media platforms. Just send us a message, or my email is jhumphreys@taxpayers.org.au. And otherwise, you can see us here live streaming to you every Monday and Thursday evening. I'll put this the website back up last minute. If you like this, or you tolerated it and want to force me to do it again and again and again, go there and become a member. Top right corner, you can click on the button. A couple of dollars a month helps us to keep things rolling over. So please consider checking out the website. If you can't afford the money, that's fine. Have a look at our campaigns. See if you can back some of those campaigns or send them around to your friends and get the conversation going. See if we can introduce a bit of policy depth back into politics. But in the meantime, I'll see you next Thursday. My name is John Humphreys, and thank you for joining.